Hi there, Jean Greer here at Stylish Fireplaces with some tips on how to operate your Dimplex Ignite Evolve electric fireplace. So always we're going to start with the owner's manual. Inside the owner's manual there is always an operation section. We're going to focus on the remote control, which is a new remote that looks like this, and the touchpad, which is tucked away on the glass on the upper right. So there are certain functions that can only be accessed on the touchpad. Those are lockout type functions, resets, that sort of thing. Most things will be operated through the remote day to day. And there's also an app, which we're not going to talk about here. Apps generally are going to be much more visual. So when you have that app on your phone and you want to figure out what to set, you're going to have a bit more of a visual reminder and a visual prompt. So in many ways, they're actually easier to figure out. But we're going to focus on the remote because this is what a lot of us still grab day to day. First thing you're going to notice on this fireplace is we've got a little red light here. That's the heat light, and it's showing up, and I'm not seeing anything on the fireplace. And this is your first indicator that this fireplace has what we call standby mode. So if the heater were engaged right now, it would be running without the flames being turned on, and that is a feature of the Ignite series and the Evolve in particular. So this is telling me that the heater is set to a particular temperature, and if this room drops below that temperature, the heater will turn on. It's a really useful feature in a space like our showroom here, which gets quite cold overnight in the winters. And so we keep some of these fireplaces set like this so that the heater will come on and keep us at least to a minimum temperature overnight, so that when we come in the morning, we don't have as far to go to get up to temperature, because we do use these fireplaces to heat our showroom in the cold weather. It could be useful in other parts of your home as well, where you want to maintain a minimum temperature even when you're not in the space. So standby mode is what I'm seeing here, because this tells me nothing else is visual or visible, but here I can see that there's something turned on in the fireplace. So if I want to bring the flames on, I'm going to hit my flame button and I'm going to get my flames. If the standby mode wasn't engaged, so I'm going to just use the power button to turn everything off, then I would have to hit the power button first. And then I can see right away that the heater is engaged. It's set to 23. It thinks my room is at 22. So I'm going to, right now I'm not going to have any heat coming on. So that's the difference between power, and whenever you see just a flame button on your remote, that's an indicator that the flames can be engaged separately from the heater, and that's what we call standby mode. So I see that on the remote, and if it's already in standby, that's the only button I need to press. If I don't see standby here, if I don't see anything lit up, then I'm going to hit the power button first. So let's talk about a couple of things that have to be done on the touchpad. And I will caution you that the touchpad on this fireplace, we have discovered, is quite stubborn. I guess that would be the best word for it. If this front glass is not perfectly positioned, this touchpad becomes pretty much impossible to use. So if you're finding you're having challenges, make sure that this glass is in position and that it is fully pushed down into its casing here. So let's try this. The first thing we can do is we can have a heat lockout, and heat lockout means that no matter how many buttons I push on this remote, if the heater is locked out, I am not going to be able to engage the heater, and that is a family-friendly feature for safety, to keep the kiddos from being able to touch this and turn on the heater in July. It's also great for lobbies and public spaces where people are going to potentially play with this fireplace and find the touchpad, and we do not want them turning on the heater unless we deem it's necessary. So to do the heat lockout, I'm going to press the heater, which is squiggly lines, and the temperature down button at the same time. And if I see 3 dots, the heat is locked out. To get that re-engaged, I'm going to press those same 2 buttons, and when the temperature comes back, I know that it's been re-engaged. So that's how we do heat lockout. It can only be done on the touchpad. It cannot be done on the remote. So you cannot press those buttons on the remote and get heat lockout, you must do it here at the unit. The other thing we can do is we can change the heat display. So if we're preferring Fahrenheit to Celsius or vice versa, we hit both of the temperature buttons and it will go from whatever it is to the other. So I'm going to hit heat plus and heat minus, and it switched to Fahrenheit. And if I hit those again, I can switch back to Celsius. So those are functions that can only be done on the touchpad. There's also a factory reset function which would disengage it from the Wi-Fi app and return all of the settings to the factory default. And to do that, we're going to hit the heater and the flame button at the same time. So the two furthest buttons, the wiggly line and the flame button, if I press both of those, I'm going to get a factory reset. Not going to do that because it's going to disable it from our app that we have set up here in the showroom. But that if you needed to do that for whatever reason, for some troubleshooting or whatever, you could do a reset that way. Again, only on the touchpad. So let's continue with some of the other controls. Temperature up and temperature down. Obviously we have a temperature down button and a temperature up button side by side on the remote. So that's going to determine so I can change the temperature that the heater is set to, and then it's going to read the room temperature and decide whether to bring the heater on or off. Right now my heater is off. I don't see this squiggly line lit up, and so the heater isn't on. But if it were on, I would just press the wiggly lines to turn the heater on. It's going to say, hey, you've set me to 26, your room is at 22, I'm going to need to do some work here. So we can disengage that. It's a typical thermostat. If the temperature I want is higher than the room temperature, then the heater's going to come on. If the temperature I want is lower than the room temperature, the heater's just going to stay as it is and it's not going to engage. But that squiggly line tells me that the heater is engaged and that it is reading the room temperature for me and determining whether or not to come on. We can set the temperature obviously anywhere from 45 Fahrenheit to 86 Fahrenheit or 7 Celsius to 30 Celsius. So those are the limits of the thermostat. Flame speed is controlled with this. It kind of looks like a little speedometer. So I can change the flame speed. So some people like them really fast, some people like them really slow. I like them somewhere in between. So that is something you can control on the Evolve that you haven't been able to control on previous generation of the Ignite, like the Ignite XL. You can also do heat mode. So on this remote, all the heat functions are controlled here with the heat mode button. So heat mode, it's a cycle through button. So some generations of Dimplex fires have had heat boost and eco, and then the thermostat all separated. This is all in one toggle button with the leaf and the lightning bolt all in one button. So what that does is it cycles through normal, heat boost, eco, and fan only. And this fireplace has the ability to run the fan without having the heater on. So if you just want to cycle the air through and get a little bit of air movement going, you can have a fan without the heater. So that's a nice function that isn't available on all of our electric fireplaces. So let's see where it's set. Right now, normal says I'm going to read the room temperature, and if there's a difference between the temperature I want and the room temperature, and I need more heat, I'm going to turn the heater on at a regular setting, and it's going to modulate the fan and the heat element depending on how big the gap is. So if there's a bigger gap in the temperature I want and the room temperature, it's going to work a little harder and push out a little more heat. And if there's a smaller gap between the room temperature and the thermostat, it's going to work a little less, and you'll hear it modulating itself to adjust to what's going on in the room. That's on the normal setting. If I push it again, I've got heat boost. So this is a pre-timed setting that's going to push maximum heat, maximum fan, and maybe you can hear it, and it's 20 minutes. So I don't get to choose the timer. It is 20 minutes, it's a preset, and it's going to do that, and when 20 minutes expires, it's going to go back to whatever it was doing before. If I hit the leaf again, it's going to go to eco. So eco is the opposite of heat boost. It's going to pull back on the fan and on the element, and it's going to run those at a lower setting to save energy, but it is going to keep working to get me to the room temperature that I want. And there is a bit of a delay because it has to cool down that heating element once it's been running. And then I can go to fan, and fan is what we were discussing earlier. No heat, just the fan pushing air out into the room. So quite a nice thing to have sometimes when I just need a little air circulation and I don't really need heat. It already has a fan in it, so why not make it multifunctional in that way? So that has been added to this fireplace. There are also mood themes on the lighting on this fireplace. So that's your paint palette. So that determines, there's about 8 different settings from midnight mode, which is what I have now with no ambient lights, just the flames, to a whole series of colored lights that accent the flames. So we can cycle through those and get different settings here. And you can see the colors changing as I push the button. And it is a cycle effect. And as on the previous Ignite, when I get to 6, it's going to cycle through different colors. And at 7, it's going to do the same. And whenever I'm in one of those 2 modes where it's cycling through, this asterisk button becomes a pause and hold button. So if I like this particular combination and I hit that and I get the little circle, it's going to hold this combination until I release it. So whenever I have it on 7, which is called kaleidoscope mode, it's going to hold that color combination unless I release it and push that star again. So normally that little star button is your brightness button, but when it is on this mode, it will not function as a brightness button. So just keep that in mind. So we're going to carry on through to back to midnight mode, and then we can look at the flame colors. So flame colors are controlled with this flame button with the dots below it. So that's going to allow me to change the flame settings here. And on previous Ignite versions, you couldn't really adjust the flames. The flame color and the flame speed were set, and that was it. So now we have some options with this flame. So we can cycle through. We can have, there's orange, yellow, and blue. So we're going to get different combinations of those as we cycle through. And you're going to have a favorite. I like the yellow and orange together without necessarily having the blue in there. But you can have either or, any one of those set individually. So we're going to get to a setting we like. And then if we use our brightness button, I'm going to get one of colored lights on. Okay, so we've got some lighting on underneath our ember bed. If I press this asterisk, it's going to adjust the brightness for me. So I've got low, high, and then on this setting, it will vibrate the low and the high. So it can pulse a little bit depending. So there's actually 4 settings on the brightness, a low fixed, and then a low pulsing, and then a high fixed and a high pulsing. So a little bit different from previous generations as far as the flexibility of the brightness button. So it's meant to create some flickering effects, and it's subtle, but it's a nice thing to be able to do. I'm going to try it with some different colors here. So you see the H and the L, and then you see the flickering as well. So you're going to see that more or less depending on the conditions in your room and the color that you have set on the fireplace. The other thing we can do with the lighting is this button is an ambient light sensor. So when we push that, it's off right now, but if I push it on, what that does is it senses the light conditions in your space, and it adjusts the brightness of the lighting inside according to the brightness of your space. So that's kind of an interesting feature. It's subtle, it's not something you're necessarily going to notice, but if you've got a really bright space or a really low lit space, you could play with that ambient light sensor and see if you don't notice a difference in how the flames and the lights come on for you. It's just another way that you can make sure that you've got the best possible presentation with the fireplace. And then last but not least, we do have a timer. So the heater will cycle itself on and off depending on the settings I have, so I never have to worry about the heater just running for no reason. But if I want to make sure that the whole fireplace turns itself off, let's say I've got somebody who's going to fall asleep in front of the fire, or somebody who's going to turn it on and leave the room and forget about it, the timer will automatically turn off the whole fireplace after the preset time elapses. So I can go anywhere from a half hour up to 8 hours. You just cycle through that and you say, okay, in 5 hours, this will turn itself off if nobody else remembers to turn it off. And then to get back to not having the timer on, you just cycle back through 8 hours and it'll go off automatically. So those are all of the functions that are on this remote. All of those can be replicated. Most of those can be replicated on the touchpad, and some of those reset functions can only be done on the touchpad just for safety reasons and for convenience. So do check your owner's manual. You can always find that on our website, stylishfireplaces.ca. Look up the model you have, go to the installation tab, and there you'll find the owner's manual, and that will always have operation instructions for you. Once you're used to the day-to-day, you're probably not going to reference it, but when it's new or you're using those not very frequent functions, the owner's manual will always talk you through it.